Well, for all of our lives, we've lived in a world of boys and girls, but that is changing along with everything else in 2017. In Canada, the country directly to our north, the parent of a baby successfully petitioned to have that child given an ID card with no sex listed, insisting that that is for the baby to decide. Things may not stop there. They probably won't. The Gender-Free ID Coalition is calling on the Canadian government to eliminate sex and gender classifications for all children throughout that country. Are we ready for a world here where baby boys and girls are replaced by baby somethings? Nell Gibbon-Daly is a psychotherapist, and she joins us tonight. Nell, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thank you so much, Tucker, for having me. It's a pleasure.
So these are questions that didn't exist like 18 months ago. Homo sapiens have been around 300,000 years, and for the most part, it was kind of obvious who the boys and girls were. But we've decided in a very short period of time that none of that is real, and we're changing it, because why?
Well, to be honest with you, we believe that people who are considered intersex, people who are born with both sets of genitalia, have existed throughout human history.
For sure.
So the federal government just released a study in 2016 that 1.4 million people now identify themselves as transgendered, and Canada isn't the only place that's doing this. Legislation was just introduced in Washington, D.C. and in New York over the past couple of months to also have parents have the right to, on a child's birth certificate, not just say that the child is male or female, but also X or unidentified.
But I think you may be conflating two things.
Sure.
So the number of intersex births in this country, that is where a child has both sets, partially or fully formed, of genitalia, is maybe a little over 700 per year out of about 4 million births. So it's less than 1/10 of 1%. So very small numbers, tiny number. Okay.
Sorry, Tucker.
And probably we can assume that's been consistent through time. But and nobody is suggesting that you force a sex onto a child whose sex is not clear. But for most kids, overwhelming number of kids, it is clear. So why should we pretend it's not clear? I guess that's the question.
I think it's a great question. I mean, as to your statistic, I had trouble finding accurate numbers as to how many children are born in this country who are intersex.
Right.
I got numbers that say 1 out of every 1,500 births, also 1 out of every 100 births, where there is some sort of either anomaly.
Hold on. 1 out of every 100 births has there is separate sets of genitalia.
Well,
I don't think that's right.
It doesn't have to go that far. So there could be some sort of like genetic, I don't want to say abnormality, but an anomaly, right? Like a chromosomal anomaly that it's not so clear, meaning that gender is not necessarily based on genitalia. And so I think your other question, though, is should we give people the right to say we're going to raise a child as non-binary, meaning we're not going to raise a child as male or female, which is something that the couple in Canada is
right, because
doing.
I mean there are legitimate, I think, medical situations, and you've just described some of them where it's an open question, and I would never deny that, and of course you want to respond compassionately. But that's not what this case is about. This case is about the idea that you get to choose what your sex is, which is a denial of biology. And there's also, and I think as a psychotherapist you'd agree, a cost to a child. If you say to a little kid, I don't know if you're male or female, you decide, I don't think you're going to get a good outcome a lot of the time at all. That's why people have never done that through human history. You know, the couple that is, or the person who's deciding to do this with their child up in Canada, the point, and I spoke to them on the phone, the point that they are making is that this child is a spiritual being having a human experience, not a human being having a spiritual experience. So it's actually a very spiritual endeavor. And what it's saying is that let's just let the child be a child, and eventually the child will decide what it wants to be, how much it wants to identify as a boy or how much it wants to identify as a girl. And this person is also saying that it's not that I'm not going to raise a child as a girl or a boy. I'm just going to say to the child, you just be a child, just be an individual for a while. Let's not have the government interfere with who you are. Let's not put a set of preconceived notions about who you are onto you. Let's just let you develop as a human being, and eventually you can decide whether or not you want to be a boy or girl or non-binary. Yeah, but you can't actually decide. And I'm for choice, and there are a lot of biological realities that I'm sad about, that I would change about I'm sincere, that I would change about myself. And so I'm not attacking anybody, but don't you think that biological reality matters, and lying to kids and telling them, actually you could be 6'7", or you could have blue eyes instead of brown, or whatever. I mean, those are lies, and it's never a good idea to lie to kids, is it?
I don't think it's a lie. I think it's actually giving children more information at a younger age than we traditionally have, right? So it's like, I'm going to give a comparison. It's like raising a child to not assume that they're heterosexual. Right? The way I've raised my children is to say, like, I don't know what they're going to be, and I'm not just going to assume that they're gay or they're straight. I just give them lots of information, expose them to lots of people.
But there's a difference here, because whereas, you know, we don't know a lot about the biology of homosexuality, we know a lot about the biology of sex, because we know that it begins on the chromosomal level. Like, there's a science piece to this that's being ignored by people who I thought believed in science. So that's why I'm a little bit confused.
I don't think it's being ignored. I think what we're seeing, though, in the federal study and what's come out in terms of the Census Bureau is that if 1.4 million people don't identify with the gender marker that they were given at birth, we have to take note of that and say what's going on, that there's a fluidity about gender, and it's not necessarily rooted in biology.
Why does that not extend to race?
Tell me what you mean by that. You're going to have to explain that one to me.
If I can say I'm a woman, why can't I say I'm a Chinese woman and be taken every bit as seriously? And I'm not mocking you. I'm making a sincere point, and it's a sincere question. What's the difference?
You know, I think it's a great question. I mean, I think as we progress as a society, some of these labels that we're putting on things, and I can't necessarily go to the race question, although one of the things that I've loved about your program as of late is that you're really into this idea of having a more inclusive society and being less separatist in terms of race, that we should be more inclusive. And I think that that's what we're saying. We're creating a space at the table for people to be to have optionality in terms of how they want to identify themselves. Okay.
Well, as long as we're still science-based, then, you know, as a child of the Enlightenment,
it's not taking science off the table. It's just saying, can we look at it from another perspective?
Okay. Now, thanks for coming on today.
Thanks, Tucker, so much for having me. I appreciate it.